Welcome everybody to the Cannabis Review. I'm delighted to be joined on this episode by Peter Sue, who's the Senior Vice President at Green Check Verified. Peter, how are you keeping?
Hey, Owen, thank you for having me. I'm doing great. It's a rainy day in New York, but I'm excited to be on the show. It's St. Patrick's Day.
It is indeed, mate. It's a lovely sunny day over here for St. Patrick's Day. So for everybody who doesn't know who Green Check Verified are, they provide banking solutions and expert advisory services to financial institutions established in 2017. You guys have brought a couple of leaders in technology and banking and to enable financial institutions to kind of bring themselves to market in this industry. Am I correct with that?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we're software, and in the cannabis space, for the U.S. anyway, the regulatory burden for a financial institution getting into the space can be very high, perhaps prohibitively so. And so in the early days, that's kind of what led to a lot of banks jumping in and jumping back out. And so, like any good software, we're a force multiplier. And the effects are staggering. Like if you have a manual program, you have to dedicate for every 5 to 8 cannabis businesses, you would have to dedicate another body to your program. Versus using software, we have clients with 50, 60, 80 accounts per FTE, per full-time employee.
Okay, amazing. And I'm just going to jump straight into the first topic here, and it's kind of capital markets and cannabis. It's something I've wanted to be talking about because it kind of brings together a couple of different topics, in my opinion. It's the capital raises that are happening, the M&A activity, and then the cannabis banking sector. So in terms of the capital raises, have you seen a dramatic increase in New York in the past 12 to 18 months since they announced legalization last March? Or was there already a lot of activity happening for the last 3 to 4 years with the lieu of this known people that this was going to happen?
Yes to both. The first thing to consider is that the capital markets, or just capital in general in cannabis, is probably the number one thing. But largely because the public markets are still not available yet. We have certain companies that are actually Canadian listed, so Canadian LPs. I mean, if you look at some of the MSOs that we have here, they're essentially roll-ups, right? So their entire business is based on continual M&A activity. And so in New York, yeah, we've seen a lot of people for years now that have kind of laid the groundworks of what they knew was coming, which is now a legal, adult use market. That said, yes, recently, of course, that activity has significantly ticked up.
And have you guys seen, is the M&A activity pretty heavy in New York at the moment, or are the investors kind of waiting to see, let's see the gate opens up, let's see who kind of gets the market share, and then we'll make our purchases then? Or is there somebody in the background now as it is kind of combining brands that are already established for the past few years?
Definitely in the background. Keep in mind, we don't have actual regs out as yet. So technically, no one can be doing any activities as yet,
Okay.
except for the original 10 ROs, the registered organization. So the original 10 license holders, yes, those guys have significantly ticked up their, Columbia Care just bought a huge property out in the Hamptons. It's by square footage, it's the largest cultivation site in America. So they're clearly, setting the grounds for what's coming next. But as far as actual, capital kind of flooding into space, that's not really happening as yet. I think in the background, a lot of that groundwork is being laid right now. And frankly, if you didn't start a year ago, you're late to the game.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an industry that you want to have your feet already in the water for the past year or two, because I think the amount of information and the legal nuances and the financial nuances to get up to speed with people who are already a year ahead is going to be swift. Do you see Columbia Care having a dominance in New York, or do you see other players that have the equivalent size and capital to go after them?
Yes. Again, the original 10 ROs have had such a huge leg up. They already have operations, already have the contacts. Obviously, employment already in place. And plus, they get to keep their vertical status versus everyone else that has to kind of pick a lane.
When you say 10 OROs, sorry to interrupt you there, can you explain to everybody what the 10 OROs are?
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, so New York State was a medical only state. And there were 5, and then they quickly added another 5. So they're collectively referred to as the ROs, the registered organizations. So the original 10 from I guess 2018 roughly, those 10 organizations, which were medical only, were given the opportunity to simply, convert over into the new adult market. So they're guaranteed essentially a license. They just have to apply for it. So of course, why wouldn't they, right? But not only that, but they have a very distinct advantage, whereas everyone else that's applying for a license now needs to pick a lane. You could be a cultivator, you could be a grower, you could be, retail, you could be distribution, consumption lounges, but you can only have one. You need a license. Whereas the original ROs, the original 10 organizations, they got to keep their vertical status. So they are their own supply chain, their own distribution and outlets.
Okay, very interesting. Do you see them being able to grow a quality of flower that's going to be able to take a dominance in the market, or do you see something happening like in Canada where the craft growers are in essence after eating away at the Tilray, Aurora, and the kind of big companies' shares up there?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I mean, I assume that they're confident. Obviously, they know how to grow marijuana. The question is it good? Is it quality? Well, is it craft? Um, Now, the other question would be, do the consumers care? Because let's be honest, for decades, despite the fact that it was illegal, people have had no problem buying cannabis anywhere. But by and large, at least in New York, um, we don't really have the connoisseurs. The way the market is, you get what you get. um, and so is there a sector of the market that will also simply carry over? Like, I don't care. I'm just walking into a store and picking up, a bag. I imagine there is that demographic. And then, yes, I do think there is that demographic that has a very specific taste of what they want and don't want. And that's probably not the MSO demographic.
Yeah, I think what might happen in New York is you've got such a tourist consumer base there that it'll be the anything goes, McDonald's type of stuff. But I think the hippies out in Williamsburg now aren't going to be dealing with anything that hasn't been perfectly organically grown and fed in a specific way. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for the kind of small cultivars themselves to come to the market.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think that for decades, the consumers that are in, let's say, New York, right, versus like a California, where craft strains has always been a thing. It's much more ingrained into the culture. My belief is that the Northeastern consumers are more like, you get what you get and you don't get upset kind of people.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to the next topic, and it's cannabis banking. So, again, specifically that you guys are in, you guys have created software. The partnership that you guys had with Abrigo there in last September was a massive thing for you guys. Can you give everybody an overview of the strategic importance of that deal?
Oh, I think that's huge. Well, first of all, in any situation where you can leverage a good name alongside your good name, that's certainly symbiotic, right? I think we help them as much as they help us, but to the extent that they are in X number of financial institutions and we're trying to offer a solution that can run parallel to theirs, it was definitely a good get, and from a PR perspective, of course, was huge. Um, that said, I mean, I think we have arguably the largest presence in the financial institutions, as is today in America. We have just under 100 that use our software. So I like to think we brought as much to the table as they did.
Yeah, no, I think it seems to be a mutually beneficial partnership. Two great
Yes,
companies with complementing technologies and talent is always a win-win for everybody.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to basically give everybody an overview. Your guys' software works with what's called community banks now over in America, so they wouldn't really exist to an extent over here. So I just want to give everybody the definition between a community bank and a commercial bank. So a community bank is basically a localized bank that's locally owned and the money is kept locally. Am I right in saying that versus a commercial bank which has a nationwide presence?
So yes, I wouldn't say it's a true distinction. So it's not as if you have a license that makes you only a community bank, or you have a license, that's only a commercial bank. The difference really is how you envision your bank doing business, the mandate that you have from your investors, from your board of directors. But yes, as a community bank, your specific mandate is, hey, we want to bank locally. We want to take the local businesses that exist here, whether I'm in New York, Long Island, um, and if your mandate is, hey, we're going to bank locally, invest locally, be owned locally, yeah, like that is what you will look for in your clientele, versus a commercial bank, which might have a very broad mandate. Hey, we do residential loans. It really doesn't matter, whether that's here locally or in Washington State across the country.
Okay, it's a nice industry to learn about because it's the one thing we hear about the most. I think over here is the Safe Banking Act.
Safe
Access
banking.
to capital seems to be the biggest thing that you guys seem to be the perfect solution to this problem.
Yeah, for all the ballyhoo about the Safe Banking Act, the truth is, I think today, and look, it's a quickly dynamic situation, right? Versus even a year ago, 2 years ago, things have changed very quickly and a lot. But I think today, where we sit, the barrier of entry into cannabis banking is a decision. That's it. Granted, there's work to be done. You need to build a policy. You need to understand the market. You need to show the regulators you've done the work. But these are works that any, whether it be a community bank, commercial bank, credit union, they know how to do the work. They just have to make the decision that they're willing to do it. Hiring a vendor like Green Check Verified is very beneficial to a program. Obviously, I'm biased in saying that, but but again, that's something that banks, financial institutions know how to do. They know how to find a vendor that are experts in a certain area, and they can carry that forward. At the end of the day, they just have to make that decision to get into a very lucrative space.
Yeah, well, I think if we were setting up an industry over here in Ireland now in a week or two, one of the things I'd be pretty adamant about is that each person applying for a license would have to have banking solutions already in place. And I think you guys offer a solution where it makes the politicians' decision a lot easier because you're kind of offering the look, we can get rid of crime or we can manage crime and fraud to a degree and all of the other aspects that kind of seem to be the puzzle for people to give it the okay.
No, absolutely, and I do think that the regulators, the examiners, will look at a situation and say, look, you need to put some experience on your bench. I get it. You've done the homework, you've done your research, but don't think you can just get out there and bank this high risk vertical without some sort of help. And hey, when you guys are ready, we'd love to help. Our founder, Kevin Hart, his family's from Ireland, so he has roots there. I hope we can be a resource for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. And with the movement of goods over in Europe, it's access to the whole of Europe when we're talking about this, which I think the industry over here will need a unified answer to this because you have so many different markets over here between Spain, Italy, France, and Germany and whatnot. Last topic I kind of wanted to jump onto is the race for New York. We were reading there the other day that so the first 100 licenses is going to people who had past criminal convictions. So those 100 licenses, are they basically, they get to choose what section they want to be in, as I said, cultivation, retail, consumption lens. Those first 100 people just get to choose randomly from those different sectors, is it?
No, no. So that first 100 license, first of all, my hat's off to the regulators here in New
Yeah.
York. I mean, they've seen that the social equity movement in other states have largely underwhelmed. And it's funny. I was talking to Ruben McDaniel, who's one of our regulators on the OCM, and he said, "Look, we're not going to make the same mistakes that other states made. We might make new ones, but we're not going to make the old ones." And so these first 100 licenses for the justice involved applicants, that is to say, you've had a marijuana conviction on your record in the state of New York. The first 100 licenses will go towards that pool of applicants. It is retail only. It is meant to be dispensaries only. That doesn't mean there won't be other programs, other licenses, but that what you're referring to there is specific to retail.
And it's great to see. I have to admit, it's commendable to the guys in charge. The next thing for the race for New York that I'm looking about, how serious is the money that's already in the industry? We talked just off our camera that somebody like Ray Dalio is already present in this industry. Are the hedge funds really starting to get into this space now, or is it still just angel investors and VCs?
So it is starting to tick up from an institutional perspective, but no, it is largely smaller. The biggest players, the biggest funds are not in the space as yet. So I would say, the biggest funds that we have right now would probably be like the AFC Gammas, the Chicago Atlantics of the world. Those are mostly debt funds though. So they are kind of lending to, existing performing players. for pure play equity, it is still hard to find.
Yeah, no, well, I
Yeah,
think that seems to be the holy grail for the cannabis entrepreneur at the moment is access
yeah.
to true capital. And I think it's only a matter of time now. Somebody like New York, I think, is just going to change the game completely when we see the industry hopefully come to fruition at the end of this year.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean it's exciting if you think about New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. The from a population perspective, that is a huge dynamic shift. I mean, after these three states, more than half of the U.S. population will now live in a legal state.
Yeah, and I think New York, the significance for Europe, how New York on legalization can't be underestimated. It's such as much as it's not too far, it's as close to America as Europe gets. So
Yeah,
generally, what happens in New York travels to Europe a hell of a lot. When it happened in California and Colorado, it's not that big of a deal. But
right.
in New York now, the amount of people that travel there, I think it's only a matter of time before that infectiousness starts to spread over this side of the pond.
Well, maybe we will have to phrase it that way, but yeah, well, it's an exciting time to be at the forefront of a growing industry. Honestly, in my lifetime, I can't think of a scenario where you had this type of an opportunity. Some people like to compare it to like the internet, for example. But to me, it was a little different because when the internet came out, let's be honest, some of us didn't know what it was. It was a brand new concept. Whereas here, there's a built-in audience, built-in demand, and it's just a matter of capturing it, making it legal.
Yeah, best brands and the best products are going to win the race at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been amazing chatting to you, Peter. I could actually go on all day. We've gone over time, but it's been great to chat to you. Hopefully, we can chat again towards the end of the year when things are starting to really ramp up in New York and we see kind of brands coming to the fore and premises starting to look like they're going to be open.
No, absolutely. Would love to follow up again when things really start kicking off in New York. Please check back.
Brilliant. Happy days. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We will catch you on the next episode.